Parents lied to their daughter, telling her the family trip was cancelled, but later shared photos showing everyone enjoying the trip together. Deborah had always been a quiet young woman. Her eyes were always alert, but her expression remained restrained, as if emotions were something to hide. From a young age, she learned not to expect much from anyone. She lived with her parents, William and Catherine, and her two younger siblings, Nicholas and Kathleen, in a house that seemed balanced from the outside but held a heavy silence within. There was order, but little affection, and the little that existed seemed controlled, as if it could end at any moment. Deborah realized early on that her presence was felt differently. Her opinions were rarely taken seriously, her mistakes were judged more harshly, and her achievements barely received attention. The siblings were celebrated enthusiastically. At most, she would hear a brief comment before the subject changed. She was studious, polite, respectful. She did everything right. Still, it was as if her efforts went unnoticed by her parents. Catherine cared more about what others saw of the family than about what truly lived inside it. William, though never aggressive, was indifferent. With the siblings, there was more lightness. With Deborah, a cold distance. The feeling of being a disguised burden grew alongside her, a weight no one spoke about, but that was present in every gesture. Even so, she never complained. She observed, kept things inside, and learned to stay silent. Gradually, she developed her own way of protecting herself, strict self-control, an emotional independence that did not come from freedom, but from necessity. Deborah got used to relying on no one, and she learned to exist in the space between what she felt and what she allowed to show. Time passed, and although Deborah had adapted to the role of the observer rather than the participant, something inside her still longed for some kind of connection. She did not dream big. She didn't ask for grand gestures, just a little presence, a minimal sign that she was considered. Maybe that's why, when Catherine mentioned almost casually that they were thinking about taking a family trip during the next vacation, Deborah felt something ignite inside, a small but living spark. "We're looking at a trip for the mid-year vacation," Catherine said, flipping through a decorating magazine at the kitchen table. William, sitting at the head of the table, just nodded. "Yeah, it'd be good for everyone to get a break from the routine." Deborah, who was washing a mug, turned slowly. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes shone. "A trip with everyone?" "Yes, of course, the whole family together. We're still deciding the destination," Catherine said without looking up from the magazine. She didn't say anything more at that moment, but her whole body lit up with anticipation. A trip, all together. It was too rare for her parents to suggest anything outside the rigid routine script. It was even rarer that it would include all the children, not just the younger ones. Deborah kept that information carefully, as if hiding something fragile from the wind. In the following weeks, she found herself thinking about the trip at random moments, in between school classes, in the shower, while making breakfast. She imagined the places, the conversations, even the clothes she would pack. She was careful not to seem anxious, but the anticipation was hard to contain. "Do you know where we're going yet?" she asked one dinner, trying to sound casual. "We're still figuring it out. It depends on some work stuff your father has pending," Catherine replied, serving juice to Nicholas without making eye contact with Deborah. "It's going to be during vacation, right?" she pressed. "That's the plan," William said curtly, then changed the subject, asking Kathleen about her new music teacher. Days passed, and no new details were mentioned. When Deborah asked, she got vague answers. She began to notice that her siblings talked less about it when she was around. One night, overhearing a muffled conversation between Catherine and Nicholas, she felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't understand everything, but one phrase from her mother was clear. "Don't mention any of this in front of your sister, okay?" The next morning, Deborah waited for the right moment to ask again. "Mom, is everything set for the trip?" Catherine sighed and pulled up a chair. "Deborah, we need to talk." Deborah sat down, attentive, her heart still full of hope. "We had to postpone the trip, honey. Money got tight, and rescheduling everyone's vacation became impossible," Catherine explained, her voice neutral. Deborah stayed still. "Postpone?" "Yes, we won't all be able to go now. Only Nicholas and Kathleen will spend a few days with your uncles, just to get out of the routine a bit. They've been really tired from school." "And you guys?" she asked, already sensing the answer. "Your father and I will use those days to take care of some things with relatives. Boring, bureaucratic stuff, nothing you need to worry about," Catherine said, shrugging. "Oh," Deborah replied, "just that." William passed through the room at that moment, overheard part of the conversation and added, "It'll be quick, nothing major." She nodded, showing no frustration, kept everything inside, as always. In the following days, the house gained a subtle but constant movement. Bags appeared and disappeared. A suitcase was packed bit by bit, never all at once, everything done discreetly. When Deborah asked, they said they were just organizing old clothes to donate or separating what the siblings would take to their uncles. "Is that Kathleen's suitcase?" she asked one day, seeing a new backpack in the living room. "Yes, we'll send it ahead with the driver." "It's easier that way," William said, not looking into his daughter's eyes. She accepted it, didn't insist, watched. On the eve of the supposed parents' trip, Catherine came up with an extra plan. "Deborah, can you stay with your grandmother tomorrow? She has an early appointment and prefers some company." "Sure," she replied. It was natural they'd ask her for that. They always trusted she would handle the unexpected. The next morning, the house was quiet. The parents left early, gave her a quick hug, and said they'd be back the next day. The siblings had left 2 days earlier. Deborah went to her grandmother's house, spent the day in silence, helping as much as she could. When she returned home, she found her parents' bedroom locked and the house empty. Days passed. She kept her routine, studied, organized her own time, did everything with the seriousness she was used to. She told no one how she felt, didn't mention the cancellation, accepted the disappointment as she had so many times before. One random afternoon, out of habit scrolling her phone, she opened a social network and saw the photos. The first was a picture of Catherine and William smiling beside Nicholas and Kathleen, all wearing new clothes, in front of a tourist sign. The background was a beach. Deborah felt a shiver run down her spine. She swiped to the next. Kathleen with her feet in the water, laughing. Nicholas holding an ice cream. The third showed the parents hugging at a seaside dinner. There were dozens of them. Well-chosen outfits, perfect framing, carefully edited captions. Deborah felt her chest go cold. There was no doubt. The trip had happened, and she hadn't been forgotten. She had been left out. She said nothing to anyone, put the phone away, sat on her bed and stayed there. The room seemed colder, narrower, but she didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't confront. The pain of the lie wasn't greater than what lay behind it. The message was clear. She wasn't part of the family image her parents wanted to show the world. The smiles in the photos were complete without her. Her absence didn't bother anyone. That was worse than any scream. Deborah got up the next day and continued her routine. Washed the dishes, tidied her room, prepared small meals, and organized whatever was needed, quietly. She spent the days alone, in silence. Didn't complain to anyone, didn't seek explanations, swallowed the disappointment as if she already knew its taste. At night, she prepared her own dinner calmly, sat at the table alone, eating slowly, listening only to the sound of the clock on the wall. The house seemed even emptier, but inside her, something began to rise. A silent, firm structure that didn't ask permission to exist. During that week, no one called to ask how she was. No messages, no questions. It was as if they had forgotten she existed. When the parents returned a few days later, they entered as if nothing had happened. They brought souvenirs for Nicholas and Kathleen. Catherine talked about the weather, restaurants, the outings. Deborah listened from the kitchen, washing dishes. "Have you eaten yet?" William asked, standing in the hallway without stepping inside. "Yes," she replied without looking back. They didn't ask how she had spent the days, didn't mention the grandmother, didn't notice the emptiness in their daughter's voice. That was the moment Deborah stopped asking questions, stopped trying to participate, stopped offering herself. There was no argument, no confrontation, there was silence. A definitive silence, not of someone giving up, but of someone understanding. She didn't react with anger, she retreated with clarity and finally understood that what hurt her wasn't the lack of explicit love, but the absence of a place. The distance between Deborah and her parents was never spoken aloud, but was in everything. It was in how she kept busy, so she wouldn't have to share space with them, in the neutrality of her replies, in the silence filling the pauses during dinner conversations. Catherine told William that their daughter had grown colder, more distant, but they didn't seem to realize that the coldness didn't come from nowhere, it came from them. Yet they acted as if she had changed for no reason. The word ungrateful began to appear in conversations between them. "She's different, William," Catherine said, pushing back her chair after another dinner where Deborah had barely spoken a word. "Teenage phase," he replied, fiddling with his phone. "A stage." "I don't know, there's something strange. She doesn't talk, doesn't smile, doesn't share anything anymore." "Have you tried asking her what's wrong?" "She should explain. I'm not the one who changed." William said nothing, pocketed his phone and went to the living room. The conversation died there, while Catherine watched from afar and interpreted everything with a biased filter. The one who truly noticed what had changed in Deborah was Elizabeth. William's mother had always been kept at arm's length by her daughter-in-law. Occasional visits, formal invitations, and a discreet place at family gatherings. But Elizabeth observed and knew where real affection was, and where it was just a show. And in Deborah, even in silence, there was truth. One Sunday afternoon, Elizabeth showed up unannounced. Deborah answered the door. "Hi, my flower," Elizabeth said with a shy smile. "Hi, Grandma," Deborah replied, surprised. "Come in." "If I'm not bothering." "Of course not." Catherine was in the backyard, pruning plants. She saw her mother-in-law enter and forced a smile. "Hi, Elizabeth. What a surprise." "I came to see how things were going." "Everything's under control, as always," Catherine said, drying her hands with a cloth. Deborah watched the two of them. Elizabeth noticed her granddaughter's quiet gaze and decided not to stay in the living room with her daughter-in-law. "Deborah, want to come with me to the kitchen? I'd like to have some tea." "Sure." In the kitchen, Elizabeth sat at the table and watched her granddaughter prepare the water. There was something about how she moved, methodical, but without lightness, as if everything were an obligation. "You doing okay?" Elizabeth asked directly. "Yes." "Are you sure?" Deborah hesitated for a second. "I'm sure." Her grandmother didn't push. She drank her tea in silence, then complimented the taste. Before leaving, she made an invitation. "If you want, next Saturday, come have lunch with me. Just the two of us." "Okay. No pressure, only if you really want to." "I want to." On Saturday, Deborah went. Elizabeth made roast chicken with vegetables and a simple pie. The conversation was light. She talked about William's childhood, the soap operas she watched, messages she exchanged with a childhood friend. "Do you write?" Elizabeth asked while cutting the pie. "I write a bit, sometimes." "Show me sometime." Deborah smiled softly. "Maybe." Elizabeth saw a crack there, and she started to gently insist. invited Deborah to more lunches, offered help with studies, asked about books. Deborah gradually started to accept, and without realizing it, she was giving small pieces of her attention. At one of these meetings, Elizabeth commented, "You know, when I was younger, I also felt kind of invisible. I had a prettier, more talkative sister, and I was the one who didn't cause trouble." Deborah bit a piece of bread, didn't answer, but didn't look away. Sometimes we learn to hide so well that even those who should know us forget to look. Deborah swallowed hard. Yes. Elizabeth didn't ask more, left it hanging. On the third or fourth visit, Deborah showed up more relaxed, sat down before being asked, complimented the smell of the food, even asked how Elizabeth made a sauce. "Want to learn?" her grandmother asked. "Yes." There, among spices and pots, the conversation flowed to more intimate topics. Elizabeth didn't push. She just listened. When Deborah finally told her about the trip, or rather about her absence from the trip, Elizabeth didn't show shock. "Makes sense now," she said simply. "I wasn't supposed to know. They left me with Grandma saying they'd be back the next day. I only found out through the photos." "Did you talk to them? What for?" Elizabeth shook her head silently. The next day, Elizabeth started to act. Checked dates, looked for information about exchange programs. She knew Deborah needed something bigger than consolation. She needed distance, real space. "Have you thought about studying abroad for a while?" she asked a few days later. "Studying abroad?" "Yes, an exchange program. There are good ones. And with your profile, I think you'd be perfect." "I don't even know where to start." "I know." They began working together on the project. Elizabeth would come to her granddaughter's house with a folder of documents, drafts, lists of requirements. "You'll need a motivation letter," she said. "I'm not good at those things." "You are. You just don't know it yet." Deborah wrote, rewrote, showed it to Elizabeth. Her grandmother helped with the words without changing what she wanted to say. "It's honest and beautiful," she said after reading one version. Weeks of preparation followed. Elizabeth helped with the forms, made contacts, and secretly offered part of the money needed. She didn't tell William or Catherine. Meanwhile, the relationship with her parents remained cold. Catherine kept complaining, "She's distant, William. It's like she lives in a bubble. I talk, she answers, but nothing." "Have you tried asking what happened?" She should explain. "I didn't change." Deborah overheard these conversations, sometimes from the hallway, sometimes sitting in her room, and only confirmed what she already knew. They didn't understand, and maybe never would. At dinners, she participated out of politeness, answered, but without involvement. There was no sweetness in her voice anymore, no sparkle, just formal presence. Nicholas and Kathleen followed their parents, still unaware of the cracks, but Nicholas started to notice something. "Why don't you play with us anymore?" he asked one day. "I'm busy." "Are you mad?" "No," Deborah replied, looking him in the eyes. "I'm just different." He didn't fully understand, but it stayed with him. He began to watch more, and over time saw that there was something in his sister that was missing in their parents. Honesty. The news of her acceptance came early the next year. An email, short, direct. Deborah passed. Elizabeth was the first to know. "You made it," she said, emotional. Deborah smiled, but without excitement. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me. Go live." She packed her bags without ceremony, made no promises, asked for nothing, just said she was going, and left. The trip was a clean cut, but necessary. In another country, far from expectations and judging looks, Deborah discovered what it meant to breathe, discovered what it was to occupy a space that was only hers. She made true friends, not out of obligation, but connection. She was respected for who she was, not what she represented. She excelled in her studies, especially languages and emotional dynamics. Over time, she earned a full scholarship to study psychology, not by chance. She wanted to understand precisely what makes a family exclude the one who most needs to belong. And for the first time, she felt exactly where she was meant to be. Deborah continued her life far away, but Elizabeth never stopped being part of it. Even from a distance, they were close, not by family obligation, but mutual choice. They exchanged messages often. They weren't long, but always sincere. Elizabeth told about small neighborhood news, the garden, books she reread. Deborah replied gratefully, sent photos, discreet memories. She never stopped thanking. She knew that without her grandmother, she might never have found her own path. Over time, Elizabeth's health began to decline. Age weighed on her bones, her eyesight, her voice. Still, her spirit remained alert. She continued to be Deborah's only link to her homeland, the only name that made her granddaughter's heart soften. "I received your memory, my flower," Elizabeth said on a video call with a tired smile. "I'm glad." "And are you well?" Deborah asked, looking at the slightly shaky image on the screen. "As well as I can be, one step at a time. But I'm still here. Thank you for never letting go of my hand. You gave me the strength to keep going. I just did what I had to." Meanwhile, Deborah's parents kept living within the image they had built for others. Catherine posted photos of dinners, parties, rehearsed smiles. William, already retired, spent long periods in silence. With free time, he began to rummage through drawers, old boxes, forgotten folders. In one, he found a cabinet where Deborah kept things from her childhood. There were notebooks, notes, colorful drawings. One had the phrase, "For Dad, with love. I admire you so much." William sat on the bedroom floor with the paper in his hands. He stayed there for hours. A silent regret took over him, mixed with disbelief. He read the words over and over. In the following days, he started sending messages to Deborah, some long, others short. He shared memories, asked questions, apologized without saying the word sorry. Deborah received them, read each one respectfully, but didn't reply. "Are you going to answer?" Nicholas asked on a call. "No," Deborah said calmly. "Are you mad?" "No. It's just that you can't rebuild something on what never existed." Nicholas understood. He knew his sister wasn't speaking out of bitterness. She spoke with clarity. Catherine, on the other hand, remained trapped by appearances. Social networks continued full of flawless images, smiles, floral arrangements, well-planned birthdays. But something had changed. Kathleen, entering adolescence, started to notice the emptiness behind the images. "Mom, why isn't Deborah in the family photos?" she asked one night, looking straight at her mother. "She's living far away," Catherine replied, organizing a closet. "But she never comes, never calls. Did you fight?" "It's not really like that." "So, how is it?" Kathleen insisted, arms crossed. Catherine hesitated. For the first time, she didn't have an answer ready. She distanced herself. It's been a while. Life took each one to their own side. And why did she distance herself? Her mother was silent, clutched a blouse against her chest and didn't answer. The guilt came there, not as sincere regret, but as discomfort, the discomfort of knowing someone could see the crack in the image she always tried to hold. Meanwhile, Nicholas grew up silently, observant, discreet, but attentive. He was the only one who didn't let the affection die. When the opportunity to study abroad came up, he thought of Deborah. He picked up his phone, typed and deleted several messages. Finally, he wrote, "Hi, I know it's been a while. Just wanted to know if you're okay." Deborah saw the notification and took hours to open it. When she replied, she said only, "I am. Glad to hear from you." They exchanged messages for weeks, nothing forced. Nicholas never gave formal apologies, but showed himself present and honest. Deborah didn't expect fixes. She wanted truth, and she found that in her brother. One day he asked, "Can I visit you?" "You can," she said. The reunion was simple. Two adults sitting in a cafe, looking at each other like people searching for what's left of childhood. "You're different," Nicholas said, smiling. "You too," Deborah replied lightly. They didn't rebuild the past. They created a new bond, clean, equal. He became the only family member with whom she kept frequent contact. Months later, Elizabeth passed away. Deborah received the news by phone from a neighbor her grandmother trusted. She went peacefully, saying your name. Deborah returned only for the funeral, arrived quietly, didn't want conversation, didn't want explanations. During the ceremony, she stayed strong, dressed in black, hair tied back, eyes attentive. William tried to approach. "Deborah," he said, voice breaking. She only gave a brief nod. No anger, just boundaries. Catherine saw her but pretended not to. Kathleen watched from afar, trying to figure out who that confident, steady woman was, who seemed to walk without needing anyone. After the burial, Deborah left, didn't come back. Today, she lives alone by choice, lives in another country where she coordinates an emotional support program for young people and counsels teenagers in family conflict situations. She built a network of sincere affections based on trust, not obligation. She carries no burden of imposed bonds. She feels no guilt for protecting herself. William, now elderly, lives quietly, looks at the messages he wrote that were never answered, lives with the silence of a daughter who is alive but unreachable. Catherine remains trapped by her own facade. The photos stay beautiful, but now there are emptinesses hard to hide. Nicholas and Deborah talk often, exchange ideas, memories, advice. There is something rare between them, a bond without debt. Kathleen, now an adult, began to piece together what was never said, questions the version she heard her whole life, realizes that her sister's absence wasn't a choice. It was a response. Deborah never forgot what she lived through, but she didn't let it define her. She learned with time and care that the pain of exclusion doesn't have to become an identity. It can be transformed into a foundation. And that's exactly what she did. She used the space that was once empty to build freedom, real, solid, and hers alone. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.